The Israel Defense Forces say that it is beginning to release 5 brigades from combat in the Gaza Strip. Now, this is as per the IDF. Now, the military increasingly gains control on the ground. Earlier, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the war would take many more months to end. And he's already maintained and always said that it will be a long and difficult war. Now, the military said that it is prepared for lengthy fighting, though in different phases from the high-intensity campaign that it has waged on the Gaza Strip so far. The announcement came as troops continued to operate in Gaza. The IDF also released footage of troops and dogs from the Orket's K9 unit operating in the Gaza Strip. The dogs carry out initial scans before soldiers enter an area or a specific building. Meanwhile, as the clock struck 12 at midnight for the new year, rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip towards central Israel overnight. The attack triggered sirens throughout the central and southern parts of the country. Hamas armed wing said that the barrage was in response to the massacres against civilians in Gaza. This comes a day after Israeli jets intensified attacks on central Gaza. According to Hamas Health Ministry, at least 48 Palestinians were killed in overnight bombing in Gaza City. Another strike killed 20 people sheltering at Al-Aqsa University in the west of Gaza City. Then in another incident, Israeli police and emergency services said that a Palestinian stabbed and wounded 2 people near an Israeli settlement in the West Bank on Sunday before being neutralized. Far-right Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich called for the return of Jewish settlers to the Gaza Strip after the war and said that its Palestinian population should be encouraged to emigrate. Hamas condemned Smotrich's comments as a vile mockery and a war crime. Meanwhile, the Israeli ministry said that fighter jets struck what it said were Hezbollah infrastructure and military structures in southern Lebanon. Israeli military spokesperson Daniel Hagari said that Hezbollah does not care about the residents of southern Lebanon and had turned villages in southern Lebanon into fighting zones. Following Israeli airstrikes, craters are dotted around the village of Kufar Kila in southern Lebanon. This comes as Israeli media Haaretz quoted Deputy Hezbollah Chief Naim Qassem saying that Israel can't bring back its displaced northern residents during combat. He added that Israel can't profit from the battle or its conclusion. It must first end the war in Gaza so that the war in Lebanon can also end. Now, as 2023 drew to a close, Palestinians in Gaza prayed for a ceasefire but had little hope that the new year would be any better. According to Hamas Health Ministry, Israel's offensive has killed more than 21,800 people, with many more feared dead in the rubble, and pushed nearly all of its 2.3 million people from their homes. All right, for more on this, we have with us our correspondent Jody Cohen. Jody, welcome to the broadcast as always. We're going to get a better understanding of what's happening on ground. We wanted to start off with, what you think is behind the 5 Israel Defense Force brigades being withdrawn from Gaza. What could this be a sign of here?
Hi, Siobhan. So Daniel Hagari, the Israel Defense Forces spokesperson, said that 5 brigades are being withdrawn and some reservist duty is also coming to an end. But the fighting is expected to continue and is expected to continue throughout 2024, albeit at a lower intensity level. So we're not looking at a ceasefire right now. Hamas has rejected both Israel's and Egypt's proposals for a truce. And the IDF now believes that military pressure is still important to defend Israel and reduce the number of rockets from Hamas into Israel each day, and also to put pressure on Hamas to bring them back to the talks and ultimately to try to secure the release of the roughly 130 hostages who are still being held captive in Gaza, and also to help the hundreds of thousands of Israelis who've been displaced from their homes to be able to feel safe to return to their homes. But some commentators are saying that the lower intensity fighting could also help reduce the impact on Gazan civilians. The IDF says that there's no limit to the amount of aid that they're inspecting, and that the bottleneck is the UN agencies and also Hamas stealing much of the aid. And they say that Israel's doing all they can to protect civilians from Hamas, who they say are using civilians as human shields and fighting from civilian areas. And in the latest, they say they detonated bombs from a daycare center in Gaza today. But while we know that the fighting is expected to continue in 2024, the lower intensity fighting will certainly be welcomed by many as these talks are ongoing towards a permanent ceasefire, but nothing has been achieved on that front as yet.
That was essentially what I was going to ask you next, Jody. Do you see a ceasefire in 2024 now that we are expecting the war to continue through the year? Or do you potentially see the fighting expanding to other countries as well? What do you think is going to come out in the next months that we'll see?
So it's really hard to say. Having rejected Egypt's proposal, Hamas and Islamic Jihad have now returned to those talks, and Egypt says that they're awaiting their response. We know that Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer was in Washington for talks as well, and Israel is reportedly also considering a role for former British Prime Minister Tony Blair to act as a mediator between Jerusalem and moderate Arab countries on a post-war Gaza, including potentially having some countries absorb some people from Gaza if they want to leave. We also know that US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is coming to the region this week, as is Amos Hochstein, the US point person on Lebanon. And that's because, as well as the Hamas attacks from Gaza, as you said, the rockets have been increasing from Hezbollah in Lebanon into Israel, and the IDF is now saying that it's responding to Hezbollah targets, I should say. But we're also hearing that the US is set to withdraw one of their aircraft carriers from the region, so that could potentially be interpreted as a sign that they don't expect to see an escalation. But they are keeping one aircraft carrier near Yemen amid those attacks on shipping that we're seeing from the Houthis. Now, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says that Israel's defending itself on 7 fronts, including from Iran. And although Hamas has denied this, Iran says that the 7th of October attack was actually revenge for the death of Qasem Soleimani, the commander of Iran's Quds force, who was killed by a US airstrike. But US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has called on Iran to de-escalate tensions in the region. And of course, we've got no crystal ball as to what will happen in 2024, but the fighting, as you said, is expected to continue, and the region certainly feels unstable right now.
All right, Jody, thank you so much for joining in and sharing all your insights. We're going to let you go for now, and we will, of course, be in touch as the battle continues between Israel and Hamas. Now, to discuss matters further, we are also joined on the broadcast by Mr. Glenn Deason, who is a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. Mr. Deason, welcome to the broadcast. Always a pleasure to have you here with us discussing the matters.
Thanks for having me on.
Right. Mr. Deason, I just wanted to start off where, our conversation ended with Jody regarding the ceasefire. Now, again, the Israeli leadership has said that the battle is going to continue for more months. There are more sources saying that it will continue throughout 2024, although at a lesser intensity. Now, talks for a ceasefire one was expecting it to come through after Hamas leadership visited Egypt, but that did not happen. Talk to us about any possibility of a ceasefire anytime soon, and also what is more important for Israel at the moment? Is destroying Hamas more important than retrieving the hostages?
Well, I think that they have to find a balance because they have many objectives. And as we've seen before, the Israelis are willing to have a temporary ceasefire in order to facilitate or in return for a hostage exchange. But that being said, I don't think a permanent ceasefire is in the cards because it's not necessary for the Israelis in order to get their hostages, and also they still have the same objectives, which is to defeat Hamas, which hasn't been done. They're also looking to ethnically cleanse Gaza, obviously, also which hasn't been done, and annex certain parts of it, if not all. So I think I don't think this would allow any permanent ceasefire until these objectives are reached. So I think any ceasefire would have to be temporary and either pressured through humanitarian needs or in exchange for hostages.
You know, there is one thing that I wanted to get your opinion on. The onslaught on Gaza started from northern Gaza. It was cleared out. Then it shifted to southern Gaza. That was cleared out. Then it shifted to central Gaza. That was cleared out. Now it's a very thin stretch of land. There is only so much to destroy there. If you see the visuals, there is hardly anything left. There is no place, no pocket left for for all the people who have been displaced. If Hamas has still not been destroyed, what more is left in Gaza to destroy after this?
Well, it's a lot less, and I think that's one of the reasons now why Israel is able to release 5 of its brigades from combat in Gaza, is because they have destroyed much of Gaza, which is now in ruins, which obviously also reduces the ability of Hamas to fire missiles. So all of this enables Israel to assert greater control over that over Gaza, given everything is destroyed now. So it's uncertain where they will go from here on, but it's less to destroy. But I think that this is also a deliberate tactic. So make sure there's nothing to come back to. Otherwise, the Palestinians will simply resettle in the areas, and the objective of cleansing the region would not work.
Mr. Deason, just one more thing I wanted to quickly slip in here. We did see rockets being fired from the Gaza Strip towards even Tel Aviv on this New Year's Day, and on the 1st of January, and the sirens were going off all across Israel. Of course, that means there is a Hamas presence very much there, which is still there. Do you feel there are still tunnels from which they are operating in, or there are other hideouts which the Israeli forces are yet to get to?
Well, the tunnel system is quite huge. The Israelis have not been able to get through all these tunnels and cleared it of Hamas fighters. So Hamas still has a strong fighting force left, and I don't think they will have any ability really to remove them unless they remove all the Palestinians, because these tunnels go very deep under Gaza. So I don't think it's possible to defeat Hamas without also destroying the Palestinian population. So this is I think the direction they're taking it. But you're correct. I don't think there's not that much more to destroy, as a lot of their targets have been already demolished.
All right, Mr. Deason, thank you so much for joining in and sharing all your insights here with us on WION World is One. Always a pleasure to hear from you, and I wish you a happy New Year, and hoping that there is peace in the region at the earliest.
Yeah, happy New Year's.